Edith Susan Billings was a British-born writer who wrote 2 historical novels and then disappeared back to Britain, never to be heard from again. Born Edith Susan Davies at Merfield, Titfield in 1868, 10 years earlier than she gave on application when coming to the US in 1919. She was the daughter of John H. Davies and Mary Jane Thomas, and in 1888 married Stanley Billings in Manhattan. The dates of her arrival in the US vary on different censuses. Sometimes 1882, then 1885, sometimes she ages 5 years in a decade, sometimes she's born in 1868, sometimes in 1878. Steve at Bear Alley Books has managed to dig up all this information, and it is to him I credit all my information about Billings. Later in life she seems to have married Granby Stoughton Howard, a con man and fraudulent doctor studying patent medicine. Billings, now Howard, seems to have made the journey over the ocean again, giving her address as Rutherford, New Jersey by 1944. It is not presently known when she died. As a writer, Billings was an extremely ephemeral presence, so one thinks this was not her main source of income. Her first novella, Today's Subject, was an Egyptian love spell, was published in 1913 in the Word magazine, issued in book form in 1914. Her other novels are the 1917 Cleomenes, a novel of a sculptor at the court of Nero, which was adapted into a play, A Priestess of the Sun, in 1919, and in 1922, the extremely obscure The Knight of Ravenswood. After 1922, I only found 2 items penned by Billings, both in the same January 1925 issue of the Occult Digest. One is a poem questioning Shakespeare's authorship, a puzzle for Shakespeareans to unravel, and the other is Theosophy, also a poem. As for An Egyptian Love Spell, the story begins in modern-day Christmas. Jack Drummond is making his way to his Harlem apartment, irritated at the attempt of a pretty girl to flirt with him. Simply put, Drummond had fallen into disgrace before, thanks to an affair with a woman who chucked him overboard in favor of a much richer man. As he muses over his misfortune, he is attracted by the sight of a golden ring in an antique shop window. Paying $100 for the ring, a genuine antique from Babylon we are assured, he grumbles his way to Harlem, buyer's remorse almost immediately setting in. When he does arrive home, he is still angry that the chief of the magazine he found refuge in after dishonor is wanting him to write a love story, when his recent past gives him no such optimism about romance as would be needed for the work at hand. But when he does sit down, everything goes indistinct, and he sees before him, as if watching a film projected onto a wall, the story of his past life as Magon, spear-bearer of the unhistorical King Ninus of Assyria. The king is returning to Babylon after a successful raid into Egyptian territory with much plunder and many slaves. Among the slaves are, of course, some Hebrews, who simply cannot not feature in an ancient Assyrian romance to denigrate Assyrian culture and proclaim the superiority of Old Testament views, despite Assyria's hundreds of years of history before their domination over Israel and Judah. Among the slaves, Magon notices a pretty young maiden named Miriam in the company of her grandfather. Magon is taken by her at once and tries to make the king, old rogue of a warrior as he is, not to notice her. But he is a much older player at the game and does see her captivated by her dance, so that she is now to be one of his dancing slaves and more. At the same time, Magon is being seduced by the wondrous cruel Semiramis. He still loves Miriam at first sight, naturally, and she him, and the two decide to flee, Miriam spurring the laws of her country, which forbid her to wed an Assyrian. But the pair are separated and get thrown into dishonor, capture and death, reuniting in the present where Jack sees Miriam perform at a Christmas ballet. The story is too short, and that's a shame, since the writing is not bad, but what can you expect if you squeeze a full romance into about 50 pages?